This episode of Wild Talk, I'm sitting down with Jens, founder and CEO of Hunter's Voice, where hunters push back and push forward.
Phototourism, as far as it brings in money into nature areas, it obviously that way you preserve some habitat, and that's good. That's all good. But I do not understand the opposition to bring in money from hunting as well.
And in Kate's Wildfinds, we're talking coyotes, yodel dogs, coyotes, however you say it. They're tough, adaptable, and they're everywhere. Let's get wild. Welcome to Wild Talk, the untamed voice of Canada's outdoors, where raw stories, real people, and wild places collide. This episode of Wild Talk is one for the books. Let's talk wild. Wild Talk, powered by Better Call Paul, is brought to you by Better Hunting, Better Stories, Better Call Paul. Umarex, Hunt with Air. Bronc Beer, Great Buckin' Beer. All right, everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Wild Talk. We're going to have a conversation that we've had many times on the show, many times over the years, but this is going to be an international perspective. Right now, this is timely as we're seeing social management of wildlife and habitat running rampant around the world. Case in point, we were just talking about the grizzly hunt that was canceled in 2017 here in British Columbia and the emotional side of things. And now we're seeing grizzlies move into areas that they're not traditionally found in. Yeah, human beings have an impact on the landscape, but that doesn't mean things shouldn't be managed scientifically. So I am joined all the way from Copenhagen, Denmark by Jens from Hunter's Voice. A huge thanks for joining me today and making the time.
Thank you for having me here.
This is going to be an amazing conversation. Before we got rolling, I was telling you a little bit about the grizzlies that you guys saw on the media over there and what's really going on here from a real perspective. And I wanted to reach out to you to chat before this even happened. And it's fantastic we were able to make some time. You're 9 hours ahead of me. It's 10:30 in the morning here. It's 7:30 at night there. And literally on the other side of the world. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what Hunter's Voice is before we really get rolling.
Yeah, my name is Jens Ulrik Høgh. Difficult to pronounce in English, I realize. I'm based here in Denmark, a little bit in Sweden. And I was a freelance writer for hunting magazines for 20, 30 years or something like that. Starting, out with writing about rifles, and shooting and hunting stories and like everybody else. But then I got a little bit into trying to explain what it is that we are doing to, in first hand, to the hunters, and in second hand, in the beginning at least, to the non-hunters. And it sort of evolved into the thing I really enjoy doing now, which is mainly trying to spread the message about how hunting is actually more of a part of a greater solution than it's just a hobby that we can easily do without. So I'm not the only one doing this in Europe, obviously, but we are actually very, very few. We all know each other and we cooperate quite a bit. But what we see is that, at least here in Scandinavia, we have managed to start, turning this big super tanker that public opinion is, so that every time they do a survey about how non-hunters feel about hunting, it's just a little bit more positive every time. So we have managed to actually, just by explaining what it is that we do, to change a lot of minds in the direction where people are accepting it more. Not necessarily liking hunting, but accepting it for what it can do for the rest of society.
Right. And that's what it's about, right?
Yeah,
we don't have to have them like it, just understand it.
exactly. And we all live in democracies, and the challenge everywhere is that we as hunters are basically allowed to go hunting by the vast majority of people who don't really know anything about hunting. Maybe they don't really care about hunting. And a lot of them have this gut feeling that they don't like hunting. So we really need to explain to them that this is something that we all benefit from.
Hmm.
And it's perfectly possible because the average person out there is a person with a lot of
Hmm.
common sense. So it's definitely something that can be done, but it's a very long haul and a lot of hard work because hunters have not historically been very good at explaining ourselves.
Hmm.
Whereas our opponents in the debate are extremely good at getting the attention of people.
Hunters as a whole generally are not very good at telling our story. We're very
No.
passionate about it. We love what we do. We understand at a deep level that there's more than just the kill
Oh yeah.
to what we do, right? And I've said many times before to various people over the years that some of the best hunts I've ever been on, the rifles never even come out of the off the sling type thing, off the shoulder.
Sure.
So it's greatly needed, and I truly appreciate what you're doing. So how did you how did you take your personal passion from being a writer, journalist, advocacy, and find the need for Hunter's voice?
Well, it started out with some op-eds in Danish newspapers written by our opponents that I just found so extremely unreasonable. They were like I don't actually think we see that kind of attacks on hunting much more here in Scandinavia, but in the UK, for instance, it's still the level. It was pure emotion, and
Hmm.
it was very harsh and very. There was a lot of factual errors in it. So that's when I got engaged in that debate. Trying to use the facts that we all know and try to put things in perspective so that the average reader could see that, okay, if we don't hunt wild boar in Sweden, then the population will explode. And everybody know that if you run into a wild boar with your Volvo,
Hmm.
there's a lot of damage. And by explaining to people that if populations are not managed, the number of road accidents will not just grow linear with the population. It will actually be an exponential curve, and we will have a lot of traffic accidents. And people understands this, and of course this was not the only argument, but arguments like that were new in this debate that up till then had been purely emotional. So what I sort of discovered was that we as hunters really need to focus on the facts, and we really need to make an effort to find the facts, because there's so many good things about hunting that we all know are good, but nobody ever made the effort to prove it.
Hmm.
Let me give you an example. In Southern Africa, we have like 10,000 privately owned hunting areas. And those of us who's been coming there for decades, we know that, of course, a hunting area has a lot more biodiversity
Hmm.
than the crop farm next door or the cattle farm next door. We know that, and but we never thought of trying to gather the facts to actually prove that this is the case. And sometimes we just need that because it's such a heavy argument for us, and when we just say, well, we know it's like this and that, our opponents will just dismiss it and say, well, we want to see some peer-reviewed science on that. And if we don't have it, then
Hmm.
then we will lose on the arguments as well. Because the big issue is always that we stand to lose every debate if it's on an emotional level, because it's very difficult. We try to, but it's very, very difficult to justify that we go out, hunting just because we like hunting. Of course, this is what we do as hunters, but if we cannot explain why this is a good idea for everybody else, then it's an uphill battle, I would say.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
And
but the arguments are there. We just need to, get our documentation straight. Yeah.
my wife and our kid just came back from South Africa in July. And it's a great analogy there about how there's biodiversity on one side of the fence, so to speak, and versus the other. We were in one concession, just trees and tall grasses and mixed foliage on one side. You look right there, like literally across the road, and it's nothing but flat monocrop. There's nothing there, and you can see which ones
No,
manage wildlife.
yeah, exactly. People tend to think that if you take a drive through South Africa, you will see giraffes and rhinos and monkeys all over the place. But there's nothing outside these nature
Hmm.
reserves. Of course, there's a lot of animals in nature reserves, primarily kept for photo tourism as well. What they don't tell their customers is that once a year they bring in some
Hmm.
hunters just to manage.
Yep.
But outside these natural reserves, there's nothing left. Small critters, but
Hmm.
nothing big, nothing that you see when you drive through. I was in South Africa 2 weeks ago, driving for a week. Beautiful scenery, beautiful landscape. We saw a lot of vineyards and stuff.
Hmm.
No large animals,
Nope.
nothing. So these animals, that typical African scenery that everybody thinks is all over the place, is only in these areas, managed somehow or the other for tourism.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like the only ones we were seeing the other side of these preserves were the small ones, as you said, occasional warthogs, monkeys, baboons, the ones that could get out and kind of
yeah,
go on their own way. But the minute you started hitting these preserves right along the side of the fence lines, you were seeing giraffes and ostrich and zebra and gemsbuck and you name it. It
yeah,
was so well done. And a phrase that I heard there from the PH that we were with was if it pays it stays, right?
yeah.
And they're talking about the success, and I know there was one success that was announced there that was just removed off as CITES was the Bontebok, and that
Yes.
was simply due to proper management, right?
More than half the bunty box in this world lives on private land managed for
Hmm.
hunting. And obviously they only have these animals from a business perspective, to make money on it, and the only real money that you can get if you have bungee bucks, because the average photo tourist will not be able to tell the difference between a bungee buck and a blessed buck, for instance.
Buzzbuck.
They look
Yep.
very similar,
Yep.
but for the hunters it makes a difference, because they want to collect one of each species, and the bunchy bug is much rarer than the blessed bug. So they want to have the bunchy bugs, and of course, in order to have enough bunchy bugs for hunters to come and occasionally kill an old male that's past its prime, they have to have a huge population of bunchy bugs
Hmm.
to have that tip of the pyramid, year after year after year. So obviously, it's a very, very, very strong incentive for them to protect the bunchy bugs and all the
It,
other
it really
species
is.
as
Yeah.
well. And
It
as you
is.
say, if it pays, it stays, and
Yep.
and the bunchy bug pays. So
Yep.
it's a much bigger challenge in this world with species like gorillas and chimpanzees and what have you, because nobody wants to hunt a gorilla or a chimpanzee. So they don't have that opportunity to make some money for the operation from hunting tourism, unless the gorillas or the chimpanzees happens to live in a hunting area where they can hunt some elands or some
Right.
rowans or some sables or buffaloes or whatever. Um, so it's actually now at the point where I hear biologists who understands this whole financial side of things that many professionals actually do not want to think about.
Hmm.
That you need money to work with conservation, but those who understand it um, are really worried about species that you cannot hunt because a lot of the potential funding goes away.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
if it pays, it stays, right?
yeah.
If there's no money to be made, very little protections are put on them, and very little breeding programs are used for them, right? And that's an unfortunate part of the way things are done. But it's realistic, right? There's what's their incentive for keeping them around, right? It's
Take a species like snow leopards in the
Mhm.
mountains of Central Asia. There's absolutely no way anybody's going to be allowed to hunt a snow leopard because it's one of these
Yeah.
iconic animals. No local. You mean there's no photo tourists coming into these mountains. It's dangerous, and there's nothing else to see. It's not that these hills are teeming with spectacular wildlife like Africa. So very few tourists will find their way to snow leopard country. So for the locals, there a snow leopard is just a competitor. It will eat your sheep, which is really
Hmm.
annoying. So obviously, it's a lot better business for these people who are struggling to feed their families to just poison the snow leopards and have their goats to themselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I personally know of biologists who works in central area with snow leopards who would wish that it would be at some point in the future be possible to issue a couple of snow leopard hunting licenses, because there would be American hunters who would be willing to pay hundreds of thousands of
Oh yeah.
dollars to hunt a snow leopard, and that would be more than enough incentive for the local shepherds not to kill them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
they already saw the success in these area with species like Markhor and Marco Polo sheep and all
Yep.
those super expensive wild sheep and goats, where the populations just exploded after they
Hmm.
allowed hunting on them.
Oh, that's right.
But
That's right.
it's just a lot more difficult with the super iconic predator species like
Yeah.
snow leopard and tiger. I mean, tigers would benefit from hunting licenses, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
But there's no way in the near future that anybody dares to issue a tiger hunting license. Nepal is actually looking into it, but
Oh,
in India, no way. And yeah,
yeah. Just imagine, like, as you said, people around the world, these high rollers would line up for a chance to get one of these permits. We see it here in British Columbia every year that the special sheep permit goes for 400-ish thousand US dollars for a chance to hunt a sheep anywhere in BC that there's a general open season. Imagine what they would do with something like a tiger or a snow leopard, right?
yeah,
As you said,
and imagine what that kind of money could actually. I mean,
do
these are low cost countries. The money is worth more
yeah.
in Uzbekistan or Nepal or India than than in Scandinavia or Canada.
Oh yeah,
Um,
like these animals are going to get killed anyway. Why not,
yeah,
right? As part of a proper
exactly,
management program, make the
exactly.
money on them.
And one experience when you do this regulated trophy hunting thing is that yes, the animals would be killed anyway, but when you go from unregulated, just killing the animals that annoys the local population, to regulated trophy hunting with high prices on licenses,
Hmm.
much fewer animals actually gets killed.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
because
right.
all this, all the snaring, all the poisoning, everything just disappears after a few years.
Yeah,
Because the
you're
locals
correct.
will be the guardians of these animals. They will
Hmm.
make sure that nobody goes and kill a markhor
That's right.
on the mountain, because they would get in Pakistan that the local communities get 80% of these exorbitant amounts that a Markor license is sold for. So they have a lot of Markor there because it would be just crazy to just kill it for food, or
Hmm.
because it annoys you because it eats grass from your sheep or whatever. So
No,
it's
that's
it's
right.
a really really super efficient way to do things.
Oh, absolutely, it is, right? It's
Yeah.
like why take that for food when you can sell it for $250,000 to
No.
somebody who's willing to do that, and then you get the meat from it anyway.
Yo, everybody, Kate here, and welcome back to Kate's Wildfinds. Today, we're shining the spotlight on one of Canada's most underestimated predators, the coyote. They're smart, they're adaptable, and they're usually one step ahead of the game. So let's roll these clips in 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Everyone that lives in Toronto, be careful. This was at the Metro in Liberty Village. These are two large coyotes, and they look pretty sick. So watch out for your dogs and your kids and yourself.
Alrighty, everybody, we hope you enjoyed those clips of some deadly coyotes, the ultimate strategic survivalists. I'm Kate. I'm out. I'll see you next time right here on Wild Talk.
Trophy hunting is a word that's very polarizing, right?
Yeah.
We as hunters and conservationists know that the trophy starts the minute you put your boots on and get outside and you start making those memories, right?
Hmm.
Right. Yeah, I've got some what people would call trophies here, but I could tell you where I was and each one of those animals was taken, right?
Yeah.
There's so much more to the trophy than just the word, right? It's been spun against us to be used negatively, but like
Yeah.
talk a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit about the perspective.
I agree, and I personally hate that word,
Yeah.
trophy hunting, because it is used. It has been weaponized against
It
us.
has.
It's a very easy. It's very easy to use the phrase that way.
Hmm.
And obviously it's a bit of the hunting community's own fault, because I'm sure we coined that phrase back in the days when it was perfectly socially acceptable to kill an animal just for the trophy. Um, it was very few hunters doing it back then, but they did it. There is actually still a few hunters whose personal motivation is mainly that they want to get that trophy back. But I think, I mean, at least the many hunters I know, that would be very very rare to have
Hmm.
to meet a hunter whose primary motivation is to get the horns on the wall.
That's right.
It's always a secondary thing because the hunters I know, they always, as you obviously do, we go for the experience. And as you say, that experience starts when you start planning for the trip. And in many cases it started when you started to dream about one day killing a big
Yep.
moose when you
Absolutely.
were a child. I mean, it's a lifelong experience, and of course, in that process, if everything goes as the hunter dreams, he or she will get that animal at one point. But the harder it is to get, and the more tries you have to put into it, the better the experience is afterwards.
Hmm.
And then there's the whole food and meat thing, which is also a part of the experience. And yeah, and of course all the lifelong bragging to the grandkids afterwards. I mean, it's just a very long process during which we accept the killing of an animal as a part of it. But if we were just, interested in killing animals, there would be a huge line in front of all the abattoirs with
Hmm.
volunteers saying, "Oh, I want to kill a cow for free."
Hmm.
But there's not. Nobody wants it.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
not wrong.
yeah,
You're not wrong at all. Like that's a great way of spinning it, right? Is the fact that if we just truly wanted to kill an animal, there'd be a line up in front of the abattoirs,
yeah.
right? It's
It's that simple.
it is.
Yeah,
It really is. And I know I remember seeing a post or an interview with you where you talked about sharing the entire story of the hunt, not just the photos, and
mm,
that can kind of help change public perception. There's very little difference between us as hunters and those that are opposed to it. We all want the same thing, and that's better habitat and more wildlife on the landscape for all of us to
yeah,
enjoy. The only difference is we are, I don't even want to say we're the only consumptive users, because they're consumptive users. We just sometimes finish it with a trigger pull
yeah,
occasionally, like as you said, not all the time. But
yeah,
one of their main arguments is they think that conservation should move away from hunting towards like relocation or like uh, like photo safaris. What would you say to that?
I would say that it's not realistic at all because I mean animals breed. This is basic biology. A very good example that we are actually struggling a little bit right now is a big national park, not the biggest, but a fairly big area in South Africa called Madikwe,
Yep.
which is much like the private nature reserves in South Africa. It used to be cattle farming in all the areas. So the government bought a lot of cattle farms, fenced the whole thing, and rewilded the place by releasing a lot of indigenous wild species into it, among them elephants. And of course, from the beginning, there was calculations by clever biologists, stating that the area could carry about 250 elephants. But then, when they started approaching 250 elephants, animal rights organizations came in and said, "No, you cannot cull the elephants because they're sentient
Yep.
beings and blah, blah, blah." So the elephants were left to breed. And now we have 1,600 elephants in an area with a
Yes.
acknowledged carrying capacity of 250. And what happens with elephants is that they can grow to extremely dense populations because they have a huge reserve of food in the bush, in the big trees. So what happens when you get too many is that they start breaking down all the big trees, but at some point there are no tree left. And this is where they are in Madikwe now. So now you have 1,600 starving elephants in a fence with nowhere to go. And there's no landowner in South Africa who would like to have any more elephants because they're saturated with elephants.
Mm-hmm.
So by not culling them over the years, the elephants are now facing a disaster that could kill maybe 80 or 90% of them, starving to death over months, which is not very animal friendly or anything like that, which is what the animal rights organizations officially stand for.
Mm-hmm.
So now they have put these elephants in a much worse situation than if the population had been kept at a sustainable level.
Yeah.
Um, and it's there's no magical solutions in this, because I mean everybody knows how biology 101 works. So these elephants are going to die off, and it is going to be nasty, and it's just sad to see, because had they kept the population at a reasonable level, you would still have a beautiful area with a lot of carrying capacities for a lot of different species. Now you have a desert that's broken down, and not only the elephants are going to die, all the other, or
Everything else.
most of the other things living in there are going to die, and that area will take decades to recover, and maybe it never really will.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a huge practical example that these loving fantasies about leaving nature to take care of itself just doesn't work in a landscape that so affected by human activity
Mm-hmm.
as it is everywhere. Even in Africa, Africa's no wilderness. Um, Canada has no wilderness. Denmark is one of the least wild countries in the world. So we are already, affecting everything in our landscape, and we simply cannot have large wild animals without some sort of management. Um, so either you get massive crop damage, or you get massive overpopulations that will die from starvation, or huge amounts of traffic accidents, or whatever the problem that comes up first will be. But you will have problems if you don't manage, and I think that's what every reasonable government in the world has since long realized. But for some reason, we still have a huge segment of people in the population who are animal lovers, who just won't realize that it's a
Mm-hmm.
big problem if you get an overpopulation.
They start with the infanticide, and some of these ones can't breed anymore, and they become more of a bio load on the next generations below them, right? You could have
Yeah,
3 calves or 1 old bull elephant. They're going to eat the same, right? Which
yeah,
one would you rather have, right? The old bull elephant that's going to try and kill these calves, that's taking 250, 300 pounds of food a day, right? That's wreaking havoc. That's not giving back to the herd health. You're just taking from the landscape. And you could have a hunter come in and pay an exorbitant amount of money to manage the herd,
yeah.
and those ones come up, right? It's just, it doesn't make sense to me sometimes, but
No, no, it's crazy, because the alternative, their alternative, is much worse for the animals,
oh yeah.
and they claim to be representing the animals, the rights of the animals. Okay, so the right of the animal is to die a lingering death from starvation. I'm not trying to put down, ecotourism or
No,
phototourism.
there's a
Actually,
place for it.
it's great tools for nature conservation as well. Anything that brings in
Yep.
some money for areas is a good thing.
Hmm.
Um, but nobody can do without hunting.
That's right.
It has to exist together. It has to supplement each other.
Yep.
And I don't know of a single photo safari area that does entirely without management and hunting. It gets a little bit less difficult to do so if the area is huge, like country size, like the Kruger Park. They don't
Yes.
have to do a lot of management in there. but in smaller areas, it will end in disaster if they don't manage
Yeah.
what
Did
they
you
have.
see that video? It was in the last month. It was photo safaris, photo tourism. It was one of the African countries, but there's like 10 or 15 old Land Cruisers, and they're chasing the herd of wildebeest for
Hmm.
photos, and they killed dozens, if not hundreds of them. Just so they're taking from the landscape right there just for a
Exactly.
photo.
Photo tourism, as far as it brings in money into to nature areas, it obviously that way you preserve some habitat, and that's good. That's
Oh
all
yeah,
good. But
absolutely.
I do not understand the opposition to bring in money from hunting as well,
Hmm. Yeah.
especially considering that photo tourists, they only want to go to areas that are close to the airport, with a
Yep.
nice tarmac road from the airport to the photo tourism area, and a luxury lodge there, with 3 meals a day and what have you, and they pay so little compared to hunters. It's just a fraction of the daily
Hmm.
rates, that you need a lot of photo tourists to make a place like the Kruger Park run.
That's right.
Um, and it's like 1 to 100 or 1 to 200. It's so many people.
Hmm.
And then you have problems, with flying in all those people from all around the world. So instead of, flying one hunter in, you have to fly 100 photo tourists in to get the same amount of money. Then you have problems with sewage and bringing water and food, and huge challenges,
Yeah.
running this.
Yeah. It turns into they turned into consumptive users, as you
It
said, 100 to 1, right?
exactly,
Like we
exactly.
get, like, as hunters, just
Mhm.
they show up, they take their pictures, and then they leave. Us as hunters, there's a lot of trickle down effect dollar wise, right? Sometimes you have the dip in pack, sometimes you have your taxidermy, you have your exporters, you have your shippers, right? There's just a lot of money that comes
A lot
down
of
from
money
it.
left in Africa or wherever the hunter goes.
Mhm.
But again, I mean, we could easily coexist. We should coexist. We should
Yeah,
actually
agreed.
be
There's
happy
there's a,
that
there's a
that
place
the
for
other,
them.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a place for them as well, and you'll never hear a hunter say, you know what, we wish death on a photo safari the way they do
No,
with
no,
us.
no, no. I
So
mean,
go ahead.
the gorillas up in Uganda, for instance, they're only there because of photo tourism.
Hmm.
Um, so there are really nice examples of how this is good as well. It's just not an alternative. Then none of them are. Neither hunting nor photo tourism
Nope,
can
they have
just
to exist
replace
together.
the other. So I don't think we should use as much resource as we actually do to badmouth the other.
Nope, I
Uh,
agree.
I think we should just concentrate our efforts on telling the world why what we are doing is great.
Last one I'll throw at you is right in this vein. So if take 100% of the population around the world,
Mm,
10% hunts, 10% will never hunt. They're the opposing organization. So we got 80% of the world that just sits on the fence.
yeah.
What would you say to them when it comes to hunting?
What really works for us in Scandinavia is to talk about the outcomes of hunting, especially the meat, because we in Europe have a big ongoing debate about animal welfare in relation to meat production. And most people, myself included, agrees that there's nothing to be really proud about in the way we produce meat for consumption. But everybody eats it. I mean,
Hmm.
these 80% happily, as I do, eat the cheap chickens from the supermarket. And when we explain to them that hunting actually also generates a lot of wild meat that is consumed, and how those animals live their lives, they can easily see that it is a far better alternative. And it's very easy to get non-hunters, to understand that aspect of hunting. It's much more difficult when it comes to this debate about trophy hunting, because the debate is initiated with our opponents and framed in a way that it's not about the outcome of the hunting anymore. As we talked about before, it's only focused on what they think goes on in the minds of hunters, and that's just a bad starting point for us, because it's, I mean, I and a lot of other people, I mean, we really don't care what motivates people
Hmm.
to follow their passion. But obviously, that's not true for a lot of people. I mean, it's really important for them to talk about what motivates hunters, and it's difficult to get away from that discussion. So here in Scandinavia, we mainly focus on the outcomes of hunting, and there's so much. There's so much that we're doing, and there's so much that we can be doing also in the future. I mean, hunters in the Western world are the primary on the ground conservationists out there, because we have access to far more land than any other special interest group, you could say, because we pay for that access. And we have a lot of influence on how that land is managed regarding wildlife and wild habitat. Um, so we could actually contribute much more in collecting data uh, about everything around us. Um, it's needed for it's more and more needed, not only in a discussion about biodiversity, but even in a discussion about pollution and climate issues and what have you. And we
Hmm.
have the access to these areas. We have the experience. We can contribute with a lot that we're not really contributing with now. And I think that we should ask our organizations to start focusing a little bit more on what we can actually bring to the table. Um, Obviously, we need to defend ourselves. We cannot just cancel the ongoing debate, because we are continuously attacked. But I think
Right.
we should also start to think much more about other things to talk about, and how we can contribute, because there really is a lot that we can do.
Yeah.
And I think we should be putting a lot more focus on the projects that the hunting community has going in different places of the world, where we are actually doing a whole lot of difference. I just the other day heard of a small project on the island of Zanzibar in Tanzania,
Yep.
where hunters are right now saving two local species of duikers by simply by
Awesome.
protecting areas, because they have agreed that they can get a few hunting licenses out of it. And there's
That's
so
amazing.
much of that stuff going on all over the world, which we should be a lot better of, telling the rest of the world about. Um,
Uh,
and then
yeah.
pressuring some of the governments around the world who are still banning hunting, putting some pressure on them to at least start experimenting with this solution, because it works so well in other
Mhm.
places.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely perfect way to end it, Jens. So, a huge thanks for joining me today, giving your perspective from
Thank
Hunter's
you.
voice. It seems we've got the same challenges no matter where we are as hunters. So, we really appreciate what you do, and a huge thanks once again for joining me, Jens.
Thank you for having me here.
Wild Talk, powered by Better Call Paul, is brought to you by Better Hunting, Better Stories, Better Call Paul. Umarex, Hunt with Air. Bronc Beer, Great Buckin' Beer.